So on page 5, there are 6 practice problems. So I'm going to do one practice problem from each section, and then I'll have this scanned so that the answers are available for the rest. All right, so practice for our speed equation. Our speed equation was on page 3. So c is the speed of light. It's equal to wavelength times frequency. And on page 3, we already did one that solved for frequency. So I'm going to pick one that's different. Number 1 says solve for frequency. Number 3 says solve for frequency. So I'm going to skip those. Let's try number 2. So if we look at our equation, this time we're trying to solve for wavelength. So I need to rearrange the equation to get wavelength by itself. Right now, wavelength is stuck with frequency. I need to get rid of frequency so that wavelength's by itself. The way that I do that is I divide by f on both sides so that I have wavelength by itself. Again, if you like the triangle method, you can copy down that triangle that I had drawn. So C on the top and then frequency and wavelength on the bottom. And you cover up the variable you're trying to solve for. If you're trying to solve for wavelength, our equation would be C divided by F, which is what we just did this way too. Okay. From here, so that said calculate the wavelength. So I have my equation all set up and ready to go. I just need C and F to plug in. So when I read the problem, it says frequency is, so this is F. And if I look in my equation, F is on the bottom part of my fraction. So F is going to go down here, 6.3 times 10 to the power of 14. I'm going to write parentheses on my paper because if I'm dividing by something that has an exponent, I have to use parentheses in my calculator. So I'm going to write those down just so that when I'm typing it in my calculator, I don't forget to use them. That's the only number given to me in the problem. So if I look at C, I have to remember that C is a constant. And if I go back over to page number 3 from my packet, C is a constant. It is always 3 times 10 to the 8th. So I can go ahead and write that down where C should be on the top, 3 times 10 to the 8th. From here, I'm ready to type this in my calculator. The light turned on here again. Come on, light. There we go. All right, so 3 times 10 to the 8th, and then divided by what's on the bottom here, written in parentheses. So in parentheses, 6.3 times 10 raised to the power of 14. Got a lot of glare on there. Okay, so once I have that written, I can click enter. And then for this one, I'm going to look at the number given to me in the problem, 6.3. This has 2 digits, right? 6 and 3. So my answer is also going to have 2 digits. So I'm going to write down the 4, and then I want to write down the 7, but notice that after the 7 is a 6. If there's a 5 or greater, that's going to make this number round up when I round away to 6. So my answer would be 4.8. Not 4.7. And then I'm going to read across to the end and I see E, which means times 10 to the power of, and then -7. Okay, so this would be our answer. Wavelength is measured in meters. So I'm going to throw meters on the end of my answer as well. Okay, so that's one more example of how to use our speed equation. If we go down to the bottom, we can practice using the other equation, which is our energy equation. Energy equation was on page 4. That's Planck's constant multiplied by frequency. You can also use the triangle. E goes on the top, and then H and F on the bottom. And when we did this on page 4, we already solved for energy. So I'm going to find one that's different. So number 2 is different from the one we already did. So for number 2, what is the frequency of a photon? So this time we are trying to solve for F, which is frequency. In order to get F by itself, I need to move H to the other side. So I could divide both sides by H to get F alone. I could also have used my triangle. If I'm trying to solve for F, if I cover up F in the triangle, my equation is E divided by H, which is the same thing that we got over here. Okay. So E divided by H equals F. F we don't know, so I'm just going to leave that as my variable that I'm going to solve for in the problem. And when I read the problem with a photon of red light with an energy of, this is our energy, so that's going to go where I wrote E in my equation, 2.97 times 10 to the negative 19th. And on the bottom I need H. There's no other number given to me in the problem. H is also a constant, so if I look on page 4 of the packet, H is a constant. It is always 6.626 times 10 to the negative 34th. So I'm going to write that down here on the bottom, 6.626 times 10 to the negative 34th. Just like last time, anytime that you see that there is an exponent on the bottom of a division sign, we're going to have to use parentheses. And I'm going to write those on my paper so that I don't forget to use them. From here, I'm going to go ahead and plug this in. So let's get that somewhere you can see it. 2.97 times 10 raised to the negative 19th was on the top. And then dividing by Planck's constant, so divide by, in parentheses, 6.626 times 10 raised to the negative 34th. Okay. Once I have that, I'm going to go ahead and click enter. And here's my answer on the calculator. Just got to figure out how many digits I should write down. 2.97 has 3 digits. So for my answer, I want to write it down with 3 digits as well. So 4.48. After the 8 is a 2. That rounds down, so this is good. And then I'm going to continue reading to the end of the problem where it says E, which is times 10 to the power of 14. There are my units on here of hertz, or 1 over seconds, or seconds to the minus 1 on there. Okay. This one has a typo too. All right, I will post the answers for these so that you have that to check as well for the rest on page 5. I can end my video.